You have no idea how fast everything's gonna fall apart. Cheating witch!
I still remember the exact timestamp when everything changed. 9:42 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March. I know the precise time because I sat there staring at my phone screen for 30 straight minutes, watching the comment counter tick upward like a heart monitor, tracking someone's final moments. There was my wife, Rachel, smiling that self-satisfied smile she always uses when she thinks she's untouchable. 2 glasses of red wine on the table between them, catching the restaurant's ambient lighting perfectly. Derek from her marketing department had his hand resting just a little too comfortably on the back of her chair, his posture screaming ownership. The caption that really did it. Finally, with my actual partner this week, I didn't fire off an angry comment. I didn't send her a furious text message or call her phone 20 times in a row. I didn't even blink hard enough to disturb the screen. I simply took 3 careful screenshots, saved them in multiple cloud locations, including 2 different backup drives, and forwarded the entire package to the very last person Rachel ever expected to become involved in her little performance. Because while she was out there staging her dramatic production for social media validation, she made one critical mistake. She forgot exactly who she married. She forgot that I never make threats more than once. The funny thing is, my warning hadn't even been loud or dramatic. No yelling, no slamming doors, no theatrical speeches about betrayal. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning about 6 weeks before this photo appeared. Rachel had her suitcase half packed on our bed, the smell of bacon and slightly burnt toast drifting through the house. I was pouring her morning coffee at the kitchen counter, preparing it exactly the way she pretends to prefer it when clients are watching. Cream, no sugar, even though I know she actually likes it sweet when nobody's around to judge. "If you post another photograph with Derek," I said calmly, stirring the cream into her cup, "I'm done. No drama, no arguments, no second chances, just finished." She didn't even bother looking up from her laptop where she was reviewing her presentation slides. "It's just Derek. You need to relax," she said dismissively, waving her hand like I was being an annoying insect buzzing around her head. But it wasn't just Derek anymore. It hadn't been for months. She'd been performing this elaborate dance for the better part of the year. Conference trips, late-night strategy sessions, weekend team-building retreats. "Derek's just in my department," she'd say whenever I'd mention his name. "He's completely harmless." But harmless people don't send text messages to your wife after midnight with champagne emojis and messages saying, "Good luck tomorrow." Harmless people don't accidentally leave their expensive cufflinks on your bathroom sink after a dinner party at our house. Yes, I found them tucked behind the soap dispenser. No, I didn't say a single word about it. Why would I? Because I don't believe in playing fair or quick. I play the long game, and I play to win. You see, this situation was never really about simple infidelity. I probably could have swallowed the lies, worked through the passive-aggressive comments about how I wasn't ambitious enough for her social circle, even dealt with the fact that she'd started buying duplicate items like she was already mentally dividing a future I wasn't included in. No, what made this unforgivable was something much worse than cheating. It was public disrespect, the kind that doesn't whisper behind your back but laughs directly in your face. The kind that makes other people start thinking they can disrespect you too because you're clearly tolerating it. Rachel knew exactly what she was doing when she posted that photo. She uploaded it during a company dinner event where she was dressed like she was selling luxury perfume in a courtroom, all sleek lines and calculated confidence. All her coworkers immediately flooded the comments with heart emojis and slay queen responses, like they weren't watching a woman systematically detonate her own marriage with a smirk and a wine glass. I didn't block her social media. I didn't rage post my own response. I just waited patiently until the comment section quieted down and the clock struck midnight. Then I picked up my phone and hit forward on an email draft I'd actually written several weeks earlier. Subject line, conflict of interest, immediate review required. Derek, you see, was already standing on extremely shaky legal ground. And me? I'm the quiet little husband Rachel often forgot to mention at parties, who happens to be the lead attorney for the plaintiff in the case that might completely end Derek's career. I hadn't disclosed our personal connection before because there hadn't been any meaningful connection worth disclosing. She barely mentioned him at home beyond surface-level updates. But now, she'd made Derek part of her public personal narrative, woven him into her identity online, and that made him absolutely fair game in my legal strategy. Here's the part Rachel had no idea about. Derek was being sued, and not for something minor like failing to meet quarterly sales objectives. He was under serious litigation for breach of fiduciary duty, contractual fraud, and violating a confidentiality clause so airtight it might as well have been written in blood and sealed with wax. The plaintiff was a medium-sized fintech company from Austin, Texas that had lost 7 figures because Derek thought he was clever enough to advise their direct competitor under the table while still working for them. And I was the attorney methodically dismantling his defense piece by piece, document by document. I'd kept my involvement extremely quiet up until this point. There'd been no reason to disclose the connection when Rachel never talked about Derek at home beyond casual mentions. I'm not naturally the jealous type, but I am exceptionally observant. I knew from the very first time she mentioned his name with that particular little inflection in her voice, like she was savoring candy on her tongue, that Derek was going to matter eventually. Turns out eventually arrived much faster than either of them anticipated. I didn't send Rachel an angry text message. I didn't blow up her inbox with accusations. I composed one precise professional email. Conflict of interest, potential leverage concern. I sent it to the managing partner at my law firm and CC'd senior counsel. I attached exactly 2 screenshots, one of the Instagram post with its revealing caption, and one of Rachel's LinkedIn profile clearly showing that she and Derek worked for the same company, in the same department, on the same client portfolio during the exact same time frame when the alleged breach occurred. I included absolutely no personal commentary, no emotional language, just the cold, hard facts. I let them speak volumes louder than any threat ever could. The problem with people like Derek, and increasingly people like Rachel, is that they consistently forget about details. They chase ego validation and completely forget about paper trails. They post selfies for likes and forget about non-disclosure agreements. They think a heart emoji is just harmless validation, not realizing it could become a potential exhibit in legal discovery. And Rachel, she thought this was just some harmless, slightly flirty snapshot meant to make me jealous. She didn't consider for 1 second that it demonstrated proximity, professional alignment, and created the strong impression, however unproven, that she may have been feeding Derek inside information, or worse, using her connections to soften client resistance in his favor. All speculation, of course. But speculation becomes incredibly dangerous in courtrooms and corporate boardrooms. I didn't need to scream at her. I didn't need to threaten divorce or post some passive-aggressive response on my own social media. I just needed to introduce enough procedural noise into the legal process to trigger serious scrutiny. And oh God, did it work beautifully. Within 24 hours, Derek's inbox exploded with an internal escalation notice. Urgent review, outside relationships, potential ethics breach. The firm's general counsel was copied on everything. According to my sources, Derek's face reportedly went completely pale during their emergency morning video call. And Rachel, still blissfully oblivious to the avalanche she'd triggered, was texting him selfies from the airport, telling him how they owned the internet this week. Owned it? More like leased it with no security deposit and contractual clauses they never bothered reading. But here's the beautiful part, the real, slow-burning masterpiece of it all. I wasn't finished, not even close. That email wasn't the nuclear bomb. It was just me gently tapping on the glass, a quiet reminder that some of us aren't here to fight loudly. We're here to wait patiently and strike precisely. Let Rachel keep posting her photos. Let Derek keep grinning in half-lit restaurant pictures holding wine glasses he couldn't actually afford anymore. I was just warming up my strategy, and they were both about to learn exactly how cold corporate law can get when it decides to look backward. The meeting took place in a small conference room on the 23rd floor of our building. Frosted glass walls, filtered natural light, expensive leather chairs. The kind of setting where polite voices systematically dismantle entire empires. I walked in carrying a leather-bound file and a thermos of coffee I never actually unscrewed. The moment I laid that folder on the conference table, the entire room atmosphere sharpened. 3 senior partners sat across from me, lead counsel, our litigation strategist Marcus, and a senior associate named Jennifer who probably hadn't blinked in the past 45 minutes. Nobody spoke at first. They all understood instinctively that this wasn't a routine case update. I opened the folder deliberately. The first sheet was a printout of the Instagram post, rendered in stark black and white because the damage was already bleeding into legal relevance and didn't need color enhancement. The second document was a screenshot of Rachel's company organizational chart with both her and Derek's roles circled in red marker. Same department, same vertical hierarchy, both tied to a client platform that had mysteriously pulled out of contract negotiations right before Derek's consulting detour surfaced in Discovery. The third document was a professional biography of my wife, emphasizing her deep involvement in the fintech accounts. I didn't write this biography, mind you. It was taken directly from her own speaking engagement materials at last year's Digital Compliance Conference, where she'd proudly bragged about her cross-sector collaboration and high-trust rapport with legacy clients. Her exact words, not mine. Then I spoke, my voice measured and professional. Her social media post may significantly complicate Derek's defense strategy. Nobody laughed. Nobody asked unnecessary clarifying questions. They all immediately understood what I was implying without me having to say the actual accusatory words out loud. Impropriety, undue influence, implied collusion. You don't have to make direct accusations in these rooms. You simply stack the documented facts like dominoes, slide the first one forward with your fingertip, and let the silence in the room push it over. Marcus, our litigation strategist, leaned forward with interest. Do you personally believe she had access to privileged information? I paused deliberately, then shrugged with studied casualness. She had pillow talk access. Marcus smiled at that, but there was absolutely nothing kind or friendly in his expression. That's admissible under perception of bias if opposing counsel cannot definitively disprove it, he said. Exactly my assessment, I replied. You see, we didn't actually have to prove Rachel did anything wrong. The mere existence of the post, combined with the caption, the timing, and their joint connection to a disputed client account, created what we call an atmosphere in legal proceedings. And in law, perception is genuinely half the war. You make a jury feel doubt for even a single second, and suddenly, objective facts don't matter anymore. Only narratives matter, only the story you tell. Marcus turned to Jennifer, the strategist. We've been waiting for a variable exactly like this, an emotional opening. Something that humanizes the wrongdoing. I nodded in agreement. You have it now. They didn't ask why I'd waited this long to bring it forward. They didn't particularly care that I was married to the woman in question. This was war by paperwork and procedure. Personal feelings don't make it into the official minutes. They started discussing next steps immediately, how to subtly reference the photograph in pretrial motions, how to build a careful line of questioning around shared company assets and communication systems, how to connect the social media optics to the ethical breaches Derek was already drowning in. I listened carefully and watched them construct the scaffolding of what would become a very public professional collapse. And I didn't stop them or raise any objections. I just passed them one final document across the table. It showed the date of the company retreat where Derek allegedly gained access to confidential documents he shouldn't have seen. Attached was a photograph from that same business trip, clearly showing Rachel's security badge clipped to Derek's lanyard, dangling there like evidence wrapped in a bow. Let's just say, I murmured quietly, they were exceptionally close. The room went absolutely still again. This is what Rachel never understood about the game she was playing. To her, this whole thing was just a flirtation, a bit of digital performance art designed to stoke jealousy and admiration in equal measure. But Derek wasn't just some handsome colleague with good hair and passive-aggressive charm. He was a man standing at the very edge of a legal blade. And now, thanks to her perfectly staged photo opportunity, she'd hand-delivered the weapon handle directly to my legal team. The meeting concluded with no hugs, no congratulatory backpats, just quiet professional nods and closed folders. I left the room with one final instruction. Please let me know before you make any moves. I want this executed cleanly. Because when you pull a trigger like this in corporate warfare, you don't aim to wound. You aim to completely scatter your target. And by the time Rachel stepped off her plane smiling like she'd won some great victory, the legal crosshairs had already locked onto her position, and she didn't even realize she'd become evidence. Derek saw the subject line just after lunch the following day. Urgent disclosure required. It didn't come from inside his own firm. This message came from an external risk consultancy contracted by their general counsel. A boutique firm known for forensic ethics audits and, ironically, public perception mitigation. They didn't send friendly annual reminders or routine surveys. When you heard from them, it meant a fire had already started somewhere, and you were either the spark or the fuel. Derek opened the email 3 separate times, reread the body text twice, and then just stared blankly at his screen like blinking might somehow change the meaning of the words. It didn't. The message was brutally clear. Due to recent developments concerning your publicly visible relationship with an employee tied to active accounts currently under investigation, We are requesting full disclosure of the nature and complete timeline of your personal interactions. This includes any off-site meetings, digital communications, and shared access to confidential systems during the last 12 months. Non-compliance will be immediately escalated to human resources and legal counsel. Derek didn't breathe for a full 20 seconds. Then he did exactly what most men like him do when they're smart enough to recognize they're in serious trouble, but dumb enough to think they can talk their way out of it. He panicked and texted Rachel. "What did you tell your husband?" She didn't answer right away, of course. She was boarding a connecting flight, probably mid-latte, blissfully unaware that the caption she'd posted for attention and validation had just cracked open a formal ethics investigation. By the time she casually replied, "Nothing, relax," it was already far too late to contain anything, because human resources wasn't waiting for explanations. The photograph had circulated internally, not through workplace gossip, but through an automated flagged alert. Their compliance system, a sophisticated AI they'd proudly bragged about at last year's leadership summit, had picked up the image through automated image scraping, facial recognition technology, and geotagging data. It matched Derek's face, Rachel's profile, and their firm's account portfolio in under 6 minutes flat. That post wasn't just embarrassing anymore. It was damning corporate evidence. And it didn't matter that Rachel said to relax. Derek was already knee-deep in an open legal case with digital fingerprints scattered everywhere. His name appeared on Slack messages. Her initials were buried in metadata from shared client presentations. None of it constituted definitive proof of wrongdoing yet. But now that the institutional spotlight had shifted, absolutely everything became potential evidence. Even the way they looked at each other in company group photos would be subjected to forensic dissection. Derek's direct supervisor scheduled an emergency call with no agenda, just join now. He spent half the video call muttering defensively, "It was nothing. We just had dinner. It's not like that at all." The supervisor didn't argue or debate with him. He simply said, "Then why are we receiving a potential pre-litigation inquiry with your face prominently featured?" The question hung in the digital air like smoke. Meanwhile, at Rachel's firm, HR had already quietly opened an internal review. Her assistant, who used to practically idolize her, had been asked to provide all calendar logs for the past 6 months. The team lead was pulled into a closed-door meeting and asked directly if any client-facing documents had been shared outside the established communications protocol. Rachel's name came up more than once in those conversations. She texted Derek again later that night, her confidence finally starting to crack. "They're not actually going to do anything, right?" He didn't reply, not because he didn't want to reassure her, but because he was already on a call with his own legal defense advisor, someone he'd hired out of pocket, desperately trying to figure out how many confidential documents Rachel might have casually glimpsed while sitting beside him, smiling into wine glasses, thinking none of this would ever actually matter in the real world. Rachel came home Thursday evening, the wheels of her carry-on echoing down the front walkway like a slow funeral drum roll. Her makeup was smudged from a layover nap, her blouse wrinkled and creased, but she still wore that same breezy post-conference glow, like she just stepped off a stage and into another chapter of self-congratulation. Then her key didn't work in the lock. She jiggled the handle once, then again, nothing. She stared at the door, her brow wrinkling not out of panic but mild irritation, like a vending machine had eaten her dollar. She knocked once, more out of wounded pride than necessity. The door opened within seconds. I was standing there in a casual shirt with rolled sleeves, holding a glass of water, appearing as if nothing had changed. But everything had. "Key's been updated," I said flatly. "You'll be staying in the guest room." She let out a tight, humorless laugh while dragging her suitcase over the threshold. "Wow, really? Is this your revenge arc? Locked doors and silent treatments?" "No revenge," I replied evenly. "Just boundaries. Something you said we should both be better at establishing." She looked around carefully. The house felt noticeably colder, cleaner, as if someone had already started systematically erasing her presence from the shared spaces. She walked down the hallway to the guest room. Bare walls, unfamiliar sheets on the bed, and a thick envelope with her name printed in typed letters. Neat, professional, ironic. She opened it with a scoff, assuming it was some petty written statement. Inside was a copy of our prenuptial agreement printed on firm legal paper, the kind that feels like it should be stamped in wax. Her signature was on the bottom corner, clear as day. She remembered signing it years ago, the week before our wedding, after a long, wine-fueled "we trust each other" conversation. But there was something else that made her blood run cold. a highlighted clause in yellow ink with a precise box drawn around it. In the event of public actions resulting in damage to the shared financial estate, including but not limited to reputational harm, extramarital entanglements, or public association with litigated parties, this agreement is subject to immediate reassessment and asset protection amendments at the discretion of the unaffected party. Her confident smirk twitched, barely holding its shape. "This wasn't in the original," she muttered, flipping to the last page with trembling fingers. That's when her stomach dropped violently. The amendment date read August 14th of the previous year. A full year ago? Not last week. Not during this conference. I'd been planning this protection long before the wine glass photo. Long before Derek became a problem. Long before she even started testing the boundaries. She stared at the date again, as if the numbers might shift if she glared hard enough. I had updated the prenup and she'd signed it. Her own signature right next to the notary's official stamp. She hadn't actually read it, probably just skimmed the first few lines. Assumed it was routine housekeeping, something about refinancing or estate planning. I'd even strategically called it a household security review when she'd asked about it. And she, distracted and overconfident and self-assured, had nodded, signed, and gone back to her podcast about high-performance leadership habits. Now the trap had clicked completely shut. "Is this even legal?" she snapped, walking back into the hallway with the papers trembling in her hand. I didn't look up from the book I was reading. It was properly notarized. "You signed it." "Yes, you tricked me," she hissed. "No," I said without any inflection. "I prepared for you." She couldn't respond to that. The worst part wasn't that I'd updated the prenup. It wasn't even that she'd signed away her protected position without carefully reading. The worst part was realizing just how early I'd stopped trusting her. A year ago, maybe earlier. How many dinners had we sat through while I was already drafting legal contingencies? How many weekend getaways had she treated like Instagram content while I quietly moved assets, rewrote clauses, and checked her ego against legal precedent? She returned to the guest room in silence. Inside the envelope was a second document, smaller, a summary of the amendment effects. It included bullet points: shared liquid assets, frozen pending evaluation, real property reassignment review scheduled, any financial liabilities incurred due to public entanglements no longer shared. There was also a note, handwritten at the bottom in my distinctive script. "I didn't make you choose him, but I did make sure your choice wouldn't bankrupt me." She sat on the edge of the guest bed, numb, her carry-on still zipped, the house echoing in a way it never had before. Suddenly, the wineglass photo didn't feel clever or sexy or bold. It felt like evidence, and the caption felt like a confession. Not just to the internet, but to me, the one who never raised his voice, the one she thought she could control, the one who was always 5 moves ahead. Friday morning, her phone buzzed just as she was finishing her second espresso, trying to convince herself that what happened the night before was just some ridiculous calculated tantrum. "Hey, I'm just about to—" "Don't talk, just listen." It was her boss, her real boss, the person who could erase her career with one sentence, and they sounded absolutely furious. "Derek's attorney just contacted us. They're flagging a conflict of interest, legal exposure, timeline overlap. He's under investigation, and your name is now tied to all of it." Rachel stood up fast. Coffee spilled onto her blouse, but she didn't even notice the hot liquid seeping through the fabric. Wait, what are you talking about? I haven't said anything. You don't have to say anything. You posed for it." Silence crashed down like a physical weight. "Did you make him post that photo with you?" Her boss continued, voice rising. "We just received notice that our firm may be dragged into a formal complaint for housing 2 individuals connected to an active federal-level commercial litigation. And if that photo becomes a key exhibit, we're not just looking at ethics reviews. We're looking at reputation damage, serious board-level optics problems. Clients will ask questions." "You've been benched," her boss said with absolute finality. "Effective immediately. Do not come into the office. HR will contact you. And if you even think about posting anything personal or otherwise related to this case, your badge won't be the only thing revoked." Click. The call ended abruptly. For the first time, it began to dawn on Rachel that this wasn't going away. This wasn't some marital spat. This was bleeding into her real life, into her career, in exactly the way I had tried to warn her it might. She called Derek, straight to voicemail. She tried again, still nothing. Her texts were left unread. That little gray bubble that used to animate quickly when she messaged him now sat dead and silent. He wasn't going to save her. He was already in survival mode. and she was quickly becoming a liability he needed to distance himself from. That afternoon, an email arrived from Greystone Financial, one of Rachel's oldest and steadiest clients. The kind that doesn't flinch, doesn't complain, doesn't even call unless the building is burning. They'd been with her company for over a decade. Rachel had worked their account personally for 3 years. She'd flown to Chicago once in a snowstorm to deliver a pitch. She'd built rapport, trust, loyalty. None of it mattered now. The message was brief. Due to recent developments and optics surrounding ongoing litigation associated with Derek Mason and the emergence of public-facing content implying intimate association with one of our key consultants during an active legal dispute, Greystone is requesting an immediate and permanent change in client representation. We cannot risk reputational spillover. Reputational spillover. Like she was radioactive. Then a legal blog published an article that evening titled, "When Closeness Meets Ethics, Undisclosed Relationships in High-Stakes Cases." Rachel was in the banner image, not her name, but her face. The same wine glass photo cropped tighter, zoomed in on her and Derek, smiling like a couple on vacation. Her caption was preserved at the bottom like a cigarette warning label. The article didn't accuse directly, but that made it worse. It implied, asked leading questions. Can firms protect client interests while housing private entanglements with opposing parties? What duty does HR have to screen for silent liabilities when photos go public? What happens when harmless becomes weaponized discovery? It named her firm quoted sections of Derek's pending litigation, used her image to color everything. By 9 that evening, the article had been reposted by 2 compliance newsletters and an accountancy ethics group with a combined audience in the tens of thousands. In the comment section, a familiar name appeared. One of Rachel's own former colleagues had written, "Used to work with her, not surprised." Rachel wanted to throw her phone. Instead, she refreshed it compulsively. Another email arrived. Another client reassessing exposure. Not as sharp as Greystone, but colder in its vagueness. That chill in corporate speak when someone's already pulled the trigger, but they'll keep smiling until the paperwork clears. She opened her LinkedIn, which was a massive mistake. One of her recent posts, a motivational quote about trust being the currency of leadership, was getting hit with sarcastic comments. A former intern wrote, "Gonna remember this next time I'm photographed with a federal witness." She disabled comments too late because the post was already screen captured. It was on Reddit, Twitter, even Facebook had found a way to resurrect her humiliation. Derek finally texted late that night. "They froze my accounts. My lawyer says your post was cited. What the hell did you tell them?" Rachel stared at the message, then tossed the phone face down on the bed. She hadn't told them anything, but she'd shown them everything. Rachel tried calling her best friend Melissa late that night, after everyone else had gone quiet. "Everything's insane," Rachel said, relief flooding her voice when Melissa actually answered. "People are blowing this completely out of proportion. I just need someone who actually knows me." Melissa's voice was low, not groggy, but measured and cold. "You lied to me. You said it was nothing with Derek, that your husband was being paranoid." "We were just friends," Rachel insisted weakly. "That photo was a joke. Sarcasm. I didn't think—" "Exactly," Melissa cut in sharply. "You didn't think?" Silence. "I defended you," Melissa continued, her tone getting sharper. "When the blog post came out, when Greystone pulled out, when the partners started poking around, I said it was nonsense, that it was all overblown. And now I'm being asked if I knew. If I knew you were sleeping with a man involved in an open case tied to your husband's firm." "That's not what happened," Rachel protested. "Doesn't matter anymore," Melissa said flatly. "Perception is reality now." Rachel tried to find something, an excuse, a joke, anything to turn the tide. "Come on, Melissa, you know how people are. They love a scandal. This will blow over. I mean, seriously, you think I'd tank my career over a caption?" "And your husband," Melissa said, delivering the kill shot. "He warned you. I was there. Remember that brunch? That Sunday before Denver, I saw the look on his face when you brushed him off. I saw how quiet he got. You laughed at him. You said, and I quote, 'You're not going to survive in the modern world if a photo hurts your ego.' And then you toasted Derek right in front of him." The silence between them was suffocating. "I can't be part of this," Melissa finally said after a long pause. "I have a mortgage and a career. I worked too hard for all of it to be buried in your fallout." Click. The call ended with no goodbye. Rachel stared at the screen like it might reverse itself, like Melissa's name would appear again and say it was a joke. But no, that one person, her safety net, her late-night confidant, was gone. Not angry, just done. Rachel arrived at her office building the next morning, dressed in her navy power dress, hair perfect, heels measured, face composed. The plan was simple. Walk in, make eye contact, control the narrative. She'd prepared a dozen versions of what she'd say. Clever and slightly contrite. Just enough self-awareness to look human, but not guilty. Her security badge didn't work. She waved it again. Nothing. The sensor blinked red. She glanced at the receptionist through the glass. The woman stared at her with a tight, bureaucratic expression. "I think my card's glitching," Rachel said, pulling the door. The receptionist didn't move, didn't buzz her in. She picked up the phone. 2 security guards approached. Not aggressive, but definitive. "Ma'am, we'll need you to step aside and wait," one said, gesturing toward the lobby bench. His tone was firm, emotionless. Rachel felt the eyes from the security desk, from the intern by the elevators, even from the maintenance guy mopping the tile who paused just a second too long. She waited in the chair. 10 minutes went by. Then 15. The lobby felt louder than it ever had before. Phones rang, shoes clicked. People whispered. None of it had anything to do with her anymore. Then an HR vice president showed up. Not the person she usually spoke with. This one wore a gray suit and carried a leather folder. No smile, no greeting. She placed the folder in Rachel's lap. "Effective right now," the woman said flatly. Rachel opened the folder. Inside was a sealed envelope marked in big, bold letters, "By direction of General Counsel." Her hands shook as she tore it open. The phrases hit her fast. Termination of employment, reputational risk, violation of ethics, conflict of interest during litigation. At the bottom was a name she knew too well. Matthew K. Turner, General Counsel, her husband. Rachel blinked hard. That couldn't be real. The man she'd once mocked for being too soft-spoken. The one she said lacked drive. The one who'd let her humiliate him without ever raising his voice. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't warned her. He'd signed the order. "Is this a mistake?" she asked, her voice breaking. "There wasn't a meeting, no review. It's already been approved by leadership," the HR woman said. "Unanimously." "But it's his name," Rachel whispered. He's the firm's general counsel," the woman interrupted, calm but firm. "And this followed the proper process. You'll be escorted to get your things. Your system access is already shut off. Severance terms are inside." The security guard behind her cleared his throat. "Time to go." Her heels echoed on the floor as she walked past the lobby, past the interns who once sought her advice, past the door that used to hold her name, past the glass conference room where she'd closed million-dollar deals. Her desk was already stripped. A banker's box sat on top. Her nameplate was gone. No card. No awkward cake. Just silence. She held the envelope like it might still hold a second chance. It didn't. She'd used a photo to strike. He'd used procedure. That evening, Rachel moved through the front door slowly. Not because of traffic, but because the weight of it all had settled into her bones. He was in the living room, calm, zipping up a suitcase. Not angry, just done. She froze, not sure whether to cry or scream. Instead, the only words that came out were, "We can fix this." He met her eyes, steady, quiet. The kind of look you give a building before it's torn down. No shouting, no list of wrongs. He handed her a folder. Inside, divorce papers, property transfers, bank separations, prenup clauses she'd once bragged about signing. On top was a yellow sticky note. His handwriting, "You picked your real partner. I picked peace." Her knees gave out. He rolled the suitcase to the door, just one bag. No rage, just calm. "I didn't mean for any of this," she whispered. "I know," he said. The doorbell rang. A courier stood outside, bored. "Delivery from corporate. Signature required." She signed with shaky hands. The letter came from the board of directors, not HR. Inside, a demand notice. "Due to the loss of client contracts tied to your actions and resulting damage to reputation, the board is seeking repayment of performance bonuses. Total, $148,250. Payment due in 15 business days." No emotion, just numbers and legal terms she used to explain to others with ease. Now they read like a sentence. She sank to the floor, empty. Upstairs, she heard the click of the suitcase. Her career gone, her marriage over, her savings slipping away through clauses she wrote herself. He walked past her without a word. No goodbye. He'd already said everything with signatures and silence. He opened the door. She stared, desperate for something left to hold on to. He didn't look back. He stepped outside and closed the door softly, not in anger, in peace, and that was the sharpest cut. She had spent years chasing applause from people who barely remembered her name. The quiet man she dismissed didn't destroy her with rage or drama. He erased her with process, timing, and stillness. One photo, one warning, one piece of paper. That was all it took to pull apart everything she had built. Because she forgot the one rule: never underestimate the man who stays silent while he works.